Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. I am an avid gamer of the RPG genre, and Final Fantasy is a big part of that. My love for this series started back in the 90s, with the release of Final Fantasy VII on PlayStation 1. Now I am a full-time programmer and dad and part-time gamer. Let's jump into the world of Final Fantasy I with a brief overview of the story. The first thing to note is that none of the main characters are actually named. The villains and some NPCs are named, the notable ones being Garland and Princess Sarah, both of which you will meet within the first few minutes of the game. Back when this was first released, they were going for player-focused adventure, where you could write your own character names, thus leaving all of the character names blank. The story starts with 4 warriors of light, and a kingdom that has had their princess kidnapped. The king asks the warriors to save her. Once you save the princess, you come to realize that the world is protected by 4 crystals, and each warrior bears a crystal. You must travel the world and defeat the monsters that are corrupting the crystals, and restore their light. Once you do that and reach the end, you are transported through time to fight Garland, 2,000 years in the past. Only this time, he has become a monster himself, known as Chaos. He tells the party that history will continue to repeat itself, sending him to the past and the warriors to continue to fight him in an endless loop. However, defeating him there in the past breaks the loop and returns peace to the present. We will see this crystal theme for a while in future titles, but this is the true start. Personally, this story is pretty bland, but back when it came out, it also was the introduction to several elements of Final Fantasy that carried forward even in the modern industries. You'll see or hear about Cid in this title. I don't think we actually meet him, but we do hear about him and what he has done. We will also meet Bahamut. This is the first summon ever in the series, and he is not summonable in this game. In fact, there are no summons in Final Fantasy I. They don't make their first appearance until Final Fantasy III. But since these 2 characters are in this game, we have Cid, who is iconic. There's some representation of him in every single Final Fantasy going forward, as well as Bahamut. There's usually some reference to him in every Final Fantasy going forward as well. I found this game fairly easy to play, but I did make several mistakes, as I'm sure people scream at me for some of them during the long plays. My biggest issues were not using enough items, not buying enough items to progress correctly, or just not using the classes to the fullest of their potential. The biggest case of this is when I was using the monk class. I did not realize that you should unequip their weapons at around level 15, but instead I had weapons equipped all the way through the final chaos fight, the first attempt that I did it. The second attempt I did realize you need to unequip the weapons of a monk for the monk to actually do damage. Overall, the mechanics for the RPG were fairly interesting, especially for the market back then. It had a fairly simplistic combat system and easy to use magic and physical attacks. Like most Final Fantasies, it's pretty easy to get lost and not know what to do if you haven't been paying attention to the NPCs, or even talking to them, as usually what happens in most modern RPGs. Most people just completely ignore NPCs, myself included. For a lot of people, this can be really frustrating and make them stop playing. So for me, this would be a bad design for the future. If you don't know, you need to get a special rock to move the golem, or you haven't been talking to the NPCs to figure out how to even get that rock, you're pretty much stuck, because you have to get past a golem in this game to get to the dwarves, I believe. Going down into the very first boss area, you have to go into a crypt and you fight a boss, a vampire, and you realize that's not the actual boss, but you have to go all the way back out and find an old wizard who is willing to give you a staff to read a tablet, and then you can continue to go further on down in the dungeon, and that's where you actually fight the Lich, who is the boss of the first dungeon. The game itself didn't have overly complicated mechanics, so I found that pretty easy to navigate. Most of the time you can just get away with having all of your characters attack no matter what class you are, even though, like I said before, that's not really utilizing your classes, and you could get through the game much faster by playing the class correctly. I found the pacing of this game to be okay. You don't really have to spend a lot of time grinding to gain levels or power to get through the game. If you play correctly with items that are given to you with good equipment, you'll get through the game fairly easily without too much trouble. And this game in particular has 6 potential classes you can play. The 2 classes I did not play in my long play were the Thief and the Red Mage. This actually gives the game a little bit more replayability because you have choices when you start the game to try different class combinations, or have all of your classes be the same if you really wanted to do that. Anyway, as it stands, this is the very first entry into the Final Fantasy series, so while it's not my favorite, I can't rate it too low because the other entries would not exist without the first. That said, compared to the other games in this series that I have played, I would probably rate this a 3 out of 10. The story is very lacking. You're just there to save the world, and that's true in most of these series, but it's very linear in the fact that you just go from one crystal to the next, to the next, to the next, and there's just not much story development between any of that. Like you originally start with saving the princess, getting her pendant, and then you just go off and collect the crystals, and then when you're done with that, you go off and fight the final boss, and then you're done. So there's not really a whole lot of story in there, which it could be better, but that's okay. The battle system was okay. It's really simple. I'm not really a fan of how magic worked in this game, because you could get up to a max of 9 casts per level, and you had 3 magics per level. It really hurt when you got into long fights, like in Chaos. You had to make sure you had items that would restore your magic, otherwise you just won't get through that fight. In later iterations, they did improve upon that, and you had a magic counter, but you also could have items that either halved the cost or nullified the cost of your magic and made it a lot easier to cast spells without the need for items all of the time. You could also use spells to regenerate MP, such as later versions of Osmosis would recover magic power. Anyway, that's just my opinion on the game, and I would encourage anyone who is interested or has lasted this long in this video to at least try the game yourself and form your own opinions. Or if you've never tried the Final Fantasy series, it's a good place to start, just to see where they began. I do promise the entries later on get much better. Thank you for watching my video. I will be doing more as I get the time. If you are interested in watching my full playthrough of this game, I will leave a card to that here, and if you are not, thank you for watching this far. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more of my content. Have a good day.